Hi guys, so here's my quick tutorial on how to do 3D flowers for being a nail tech and just anyone that's looking to try them out. So it took me a really long time to try 3D flowers out. Like, I don't know why, for some reason I was so intimidated about them. And I remember seeing a video of a girl saying that she pre-does them because it's that difficult. So this is my first time properly doing it on nails, but I've obviously practiced on like pieces of tissue and practice hands and stuff like that. So my main points of advice is knowing your bead to liquid to powder ratio. I think that's really important. So with acrylic powders, with acrylic flowers, it is really important that you understand the difference between that and your application. So with your application, you have obviously different ratios of liquid to powder depending on the consistency of what bead that you're doing for apex, cuticle, or the free edge. With acrylic flowers, it's really weird. You're supposed to aim for a drier bead, but not too dry that it doesn't adhere to the acrylic nail, which is what I'll show you later that I did. So you basically want your beads to be dry enough that it sticks to the acrylic bed, and it can't be too runny, otherwise it loses its shape, and maintaining the flower will be like very, very difficult, especially because of how small the design is supposed to be. You really don't want it like half the time to be trying to recover it and for it to spread all over the nail. So keep into mind that this brush is a lot smaller, so I genuinely just think you do have to practice doing the beads with the brush that you use. For me, what helped is with this brush, I did 2 swipes and 1 drag of acrylic, and you sort of have to eye the amount of acrylic that you want, but keep into mind, for example, this is like the smallest part of my acrylic nail itself, and it was in the corner, so I sort of just went off eye how small I wanted the bead. But depending on where you want the acrylic, also depending on what style you want the flower, is really important. But just in general, just go over these basic flowers that I'm doing here. So one of my main tips, so I did 2 swipes to monomer, and I honestly think, obviously depending on the products that you use, the colors of the acrylic that you use. So for example, with me, I used to get so stressed as a beginner nail tech because even though I was using the same brand, the same monomers, they would act differently depending on the shades of acrylic that I would use from the same brand, and I didn't know that. So this is obviously a very general rule. I'm using Mia's Secret, a white acrylic powder, and I know white is quite more runnier, so I think the reason why the acrylic was so solid was because my room was like a good temperature. The heaters were on, it wasn't anything like too crazy. So here is an example of where my bead was way too dry and I still tried to force it, but you can literally see that it's not moving from my brush, and also it's not adhering on my acrylic. So if that happens, what I did is I just got more monomer and I just wiped it off, and like that's an easy fix. So I did 2 swipes of monomer and 1 small drag of acrylic powder in the bead. So what I'm mainly trying to do is I let it sit there for a bit and dry, and while I'm doing that, I'm tapering the bottom part of the edges. That's just so it gathers more shape. With this bead, as you can see, it was way too runny, which is really important to like recognize it before it dries, but I'm still trying to make it work.
So once I start to realize that the bead isn't working, I end up swiping it off. But I think one important thing that will be the basis of how good your acrylic is in general, and also the 3D flowers, is if the bead isn't good, if it's too runny, if it's too dry, just make sure that you change it or wipe it off, as it's just going to cause issues with retention in the long run. So it's just better you start again as opposed to trying to make the dry or runny bead work.
Okay, now here we have a perfect bead. So again, this is the 2 swipes of monomer and 1 like small. You have to sort of eye the amount of product that you want to use, but again, you'll get used to it depending on what your product is. So the main point of this is the technique. So as you can see, I'm slowly creating a dent in the middle using the side of my brush. I'm tapering the ends using the side and turning it upside down and using the middle my brush as a sort of anchor to make a dent in the middle. You want to work sort of fast with the acrylic, just because after you leave it there sat for a bit just to let it dry. You do want to like keep in mind that it is going to dry, but it's a lot more easier to mold in my opinion. So here I'm just making sure that the sides are tapered and also maintaining that dent. As you can see, the top right now looks very, very round, and you want to avoid that.
So just always make sure that you're kind of tapering the bottom and also tapering the edges so that they kind of have the right fit for the flower that you're designing. So if it's more square or more round, then you should just always structure that with the brush. And always make sure your brush is moisturized, guys. Every time that you put monomer onto the brush, you're kind of hydrating the acrylic, and there's only a limited amount of time that you have really to ensure that you can shape the bead. So just ensure if the brush is ever getting dry, just make sure you've got some monomer on that brush. So thank you guys for watching. Here's the final result. If you guys want to know more about nails, I break that down in my Substack. You can subscribe for free. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.